Hey folks, this is Matt with Crypto Heartbeat. Today I'm going to do some predicting of the future. This is not the kind of video that you think I'm going to make around price predictions for Pulse. This is actually a much bigger idea, and I want to share some thoughts with you that I think are tremendous because it speaks to the genius of Richard Hart when it comes to the HEX contract, and it also speaks to the future of the PulseChain. So this morning, I found myself behind a cement mixer. So one of those cement trucks that spins and spins. And I sat there at the light for a long time watching this thing spin around. And I realized that this was the picture of value. And so what's really interesting about this metaphor is the fact that it's carrying cement. And you think about the point in which you have to get a cement truck to come to your job site. You probably planned a long time ahead of time with what you were going to build, what it was going to be for, get the drawings, the architecture, investment, financing, all of that. And one day you're going to have this cement truck show up and lay the foundation of your project. And so here I was stuck behind this truck, seeing this thing spin, and it represented the foundational value of someone's project. And it made me think about what cryptocurrency and the blockchain really means. And so I don't know about you, but when I first got into HEX and started listening to Richard Hart, he talked about the PulseChain. And he said the PulseChain is going to have this sacrifice stage or phase. And I thought, this is an interesting concept of sacrificing. And he used the term that this was sacrificing for free speech. And I thought it was kind of like a BS way of saying, all right, here's just an excuse so I'm not doing work for others. And I think that it didn't dawn on me until recently of what he really meant by free speech. And so I'm going to share something with you that I have some thoughts and a prediction about for the future of the entire financial system within the world. And I'm hoping that this idea is as meaningful for you as it is for me. So let me share this with you. When Richard Hart said that you're going to sacrifice for free speech, I want you to think about what the blockchain is and what a smart contract is, and the way that HEX was built. HEX is immutable, a finished project that was put out into the financial sphere as a completed work. This means it cannot be altered even by the author, so Richard himself. What's really incredible about that is that it means something bigger than I thought it meant. And what I mean is this. So if you look at the United States of America and you look at the founding of America, there was a really unique idea that was brought to the political sphere, and that was the idea of decentralized power. That power would be inherent in the people and that they would have gifts that are bestowed on them by God that are inherent, and that the government should be limited, and that essentially the power is decentralized. Well, fast forward to the 21st century, and here's blockchain, and Satoshi writes this, article, and we have the birth of Bitcoin. And then, of course, Vitalik and Ethereum and the smart contract. And what's interesting is I compare it to to Pandora's box, and in a good way. Pandora's box is opened with smart chain contracts because of something that is inherently based on freedom. So if you think about early America, the political war was won, right? And independence was gained by these colonies. And they basically looked around and said, well, we've got to make the rules. And so what did Alexander Hamilton do but become the head of the Treasury? And so the power politically and financially was connected together. And therein lies some of the challenge, because if a man's heart is corrupt above all else and is flawed, when you tie political power and finances together, you get potential corruption. So when Richard Hart said that there was this free speech that we're declaring when we sacrifice to Pulse, I didn't really understand it. And maybe I'm reading a little bit more into it than I should, but I want to make a point, and that is a fundamental concept of freedom as it relates to the blockchain. We're in a world where totalitarianism is increasing significantly, and the heavy hand of government, from lockdowns to requirements to all sorts of things. And I don't know where you fit in the spectrum. This is not a political conversation. But what's amazing to me about Hex and Pulse in this community is the fact that no one's talking about ideology, no one's talking about their political beliefs, no one is, it's just not about that. And I would venture to say the reason it's not about that is because of the fact that the value is shared by everyone. And that this is something where everyone wins together. The rising tide lifts all boats. And that when we talk about the financial benefit of this blockchain experiment called Hex and Pulse, we realize that if we can win together, all this ideological stuff doesn't make a difference at all. And so this community comes together and we don't get tied up with all of these things that are issues. And so I'm really, really enamored with this idea of freedom when the financial contract gets separated from the political one. We find that everyone can participate in the process depending on their level of investment. And so I'm going to try to break this down to make it simpler. Look at HEX's contract. It is the Federal Reserve and it is a bank together. What I mean by that is inherently it's an inflationary currency. Well, what are all governments? I mean, think about when cars came out the first time and how much they cost versus how much they cost today. Obviously, there's a difference between the cost of a car in the early days of Ford Motor Company and a Ford F-150 Lightning's price today. And so I would submit to you that this inflation, which is basically the growth and productivity of America or any other country, what if people could share in that benefit together? And Richard Hart and his genius saw this with the HEX contract and built in a 3.69% inflation rate and said anyone who's willing to push out their gratification can participate this and be rewarded with yield. And this is kind of like a bond, right? Ultimately, you're buying into something and saying, all right, I want to participate in its yield or growth. But unlike printing of money within the Federal Reserve or a central bank, this is built into the contract. So we have this expectation that anyone who's willing to sacrifice is willing to benefit in basically the minting of new value. This is an enormous idea because it means that everyone is on a level footing and can basically risk and can be rewarded based on that risk. And what I love about it is it says something fundamental about the HEX contract and really the genius of Richard Hart. And that is he's really given us something that is a core building block of the future freedom of this world. And I'm going to make the point that he's disconnecting political power from financial power. And when all the people across the world, based on their communities and interests and their like-mindedness, are essentially setting up digital borders around the things that they believe in and saying, we all can win together. And I believe fundamentally, when we all are winning together, we find that there's an abundance. There's more than enough to go around. And then we look internally and say, well, if I have more than I need, how can I serve those around me? And what I love in the world that I'm in the nonprofit space of helping communities and kids and families and all of these things is that having an abundance and being a steward of those resources impacts the people around us. And really it dawned on me, Richard Hart's genius of this setup, the way in which the HEX contract is set up and what he's doing with Pulse as well, is literally a gift to ultimately long-term freedom. And I'm going to make a point, because you might say that's a pretty bold statement. It is a bold statement, but here's why I mean, or what I mean. If you look at the origins of soft drinks, and I know this is a random reference, Coca-Cola was one of the first colas, right? Well, it had cocaine in it, if you can believe that. And of course, you know, that makes your product pretty attractive, I think. Have a Coke and a smile. And What's interesting about it, it was the first of its kind in a new category called soft drinks. And today, of course, you know, how many different beverages that are carbonated are there? I mean, there's just like a million, it seems like. I believe that the HEX contract and what it does is the fundamental building block of the future of value for what I would call the new financial freedom and the digital countries that will be created around audiences that are affinity based. They're not limited by rank or riverbank, meaning boundaries of countries don't matter, language doesn't matter. It's people who are like-minded who are going to assemble and gather value, and it's going to be based on the building blocks. And I believe that what Richard Hart did with HEX is potentially as big as what Satoshi did with blockchain, right? With Bitcoin itself. These ideas of letting everyone participate in the inflationary rate, and based on their investment and their sacrifice, they are rewarded. That to me is incredible, because what it does is it removes the corruptive forces of the human heart from it and basically says, this is completely transparent and this is something that's immutable. And to me, it's a big idea. I wanted to share that with you. That's not the prediction you were probably expecting. But I will say this, as I say every time, I'm super excited about the PulseChain. This is a new Ethereum fork created by Richard Hart, who created HEX. And I think this is going to be one of the most disruptive and most exciting experiments in blockchain history, because he's copying over the system state. That's all 10,000 ERC20 coins all together. To me, it's an amazing opportunity for value being created. But today, I just wanted to focus on the fact that the core kernel or building blocks of freedom, I came to a new understanding about. And I want to say directly to Richard Hart, thank you for providing for us a way forward. Have a great day.